The gunshot that echoed through Sweetwater, Montana that morning in 1884 had nothing to do with the woman Yates Anderson would find curled beneath his porch 3 hours later, though he would wonder about it for weeks to come. He had been checking the fence line on his property when his dog, a mangy mutt named Copper, started barking at the house with an urgency that made Yates abandon his work and ride back at a gallop. The August heat shimmered off the dusty ground as he dismounted, and Copper was whining now, pawing at the gap between the porch boards and the dry earth beneath. Yates got down on his knees, his weathered face creasing as he peered into the shadows. What he saw made his heart clench. A woman, young from what he could tell, was pressed against the foundation of his house, her dress torn and filthy, her dark hair matted with dried blood. She was breathing but barely, and she did not stir when he called out to her. He had to pull 3 boards loose to get to her, and when he finally dragged her out into the sunlight, he could see she was in bad shape. Her face was bruised purple along one side, her lips cracked and bleeding. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old. Her dress, once probably a decent calico, was now little more than rags. She smelled of sweat and fear and something else, something darker that Yates recognized from his years riding with the cavalry. Blood. Yates was 31 years old, a man who kept to himself on his small ranch 5 miles outside Sweetwater. He had done his time in the Army, seen enough violence to last him a lifetime, and had come to Montana to raise horses and cattle in peace. He was not a man who sought out trouble, but he was not one to turn away from someone in need either. He carried her inside his house, a modest 4-room structure he had built himself 3 years prior. The interior was sparse but clean, the furniture handmade and functional. He laid her on his own bed, the only proper bed in the house, and went to fetch water and clean cloths. Copper followed him everywhere, still whining with concern. As he cleaned the blood from her face, Yates could see that she was pretty, despite the bruising. Her features were delicate, her bone structure refined in a way that suggested she had not always been running for her life. Her hands, when he examined them, were soft, not the work-roughened hands of a ranch wife or a laundress. There were rope burns around her wrists, angry and red against her pale skin. She woke suddenly, violently, her green eyes flying open as she tried to scream. Only a hoarse croak came out. Yates stepped back, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm. "You are safe here. I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him, her chest heaving with panic, her eyes darting around the room looking for an escape. When she tried to sit up, she gasped in pain and collapsed back against the pillow. "You have got some broken ribs, I think," Yates said. "And you have been hurt pretty bad. I am Yates Anderson. This is my ranch. I found you under my porch this morning." She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat was too damaged. Yates poured water into a cup and held it to her lips. She drank greedily, desperately, and he had to pull it away so she would not make herself sick. "Slow," he said. "You have got time." After she had taken a few more careful sips, she managed to whisper, "Thank you." "What is your name?" Yates asked. She hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Then quietly, Katherine Lawson." "Who did this to you, Katherine?" She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her bruised cheeks. "Men," she said. "Bad men. They took me from the stage 3 days ago. I escaped last night. I ran, I do not know how far." Yates felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. There were gangs that operated in the territory, men who preyed on travelers and settlers. The law was thin out here, and justice often came too late or not at all. "They will be looking for me," Katherine whispered, fresh panic in her voice. "When they find me, they will kill me, and anyone who helped me." Then we will make sure they do not find you, Yates said. He stood and went to the window, scanning the horizon. Nothing but grassland and sky. You rest. I am going to secure the property. He spent the next hour checking his rifle and shotgun, making sure they were loaded and ready. He brought his horses into the barn, not wanting them to give away his presence if riders came by. He filled buckets with water and placed them strategically around the house. Then he went back inside to check on Katherine. She had fallen asleep again, her breathing ragged but steady. Yates sat in a chair by the bed and watched her, trying to piece together what had happened. A young woman, alone on a stage taken by outlaws. They would have wanted her for ransom, or worse. The fact that she had escaped suggested she was both brave and resourceful. The fact that she had made it to his ranch, miles from the nearest road, suggested she was also lucky. When she woke again, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. She looked at him with those green eyes, and he saw intelligence there and determination. "I need to send word to town," Katherine said, her voice a little stronger now. "My uncle, he will be worried." "Who is your uncle?" "Robert Lawson. He owns the bank in Sweetwater." Yates knew the name. Robert Lawson was a wealthy man, influential in the territory. He had arrived 2 years ago and had quickly established himself as a pillar of the community. If Katherine was his niece, that explained her refined appearance and soft hands. It also meant that her kidnapping was likely about money. "I will ride to town tomorrow," Yates said, "but tonight you need to rest and heal." "I cannot ask you to do this," Katherine said. "You have already done so much. If they find out you helped me, they will not," Yates interrupted. "And even if they do, I can handle myself." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his broad shoulders, the way he carried himself with a quiet confidence. "You are a soldier," she said. It was not a question. "Was," Yates corrected. "Cavalry, I left that life behind." "Why?" "Because I got tired of fighting other people's wars." He stood and went to the stove where a pot of beans was simmering. "You need to eat. Keep your strength up." He fed her carefully, spooning the beans into her mouth like she was a child. She was too weak to protest, too hungry to care. When she was done, she lay back against the pillow and closed her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Yates considered the question. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "Not many men would think so." "Then not many men are worth knowing." She smiled at that just a little, and then sleep took her again. Yates stayed awake through the night, keeping watch. Around midnight, he heard horses in the distance and grabbed his rifle, positioning himself by the window. 2 riders passed on the far ridge, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. They did not approach the house, but Yates did not relax until they were long gone. The next morning, Katherine was able to sit up, though the pain in her ribs made her gasp. Yates helped her to a chair and gave her coffee and biscuits. She ate slowly, gratefully. "Tell me what happened," Yates said. "From the beginning." Katherine took a breath, steadying herself. "I was traveling from Chicago to meet my uncle. My parents died last year and I had nowhere else to go. Uncle Robert sent money for my passage. The stage was 2 days out of Sweetwater when they attacked. There were 4 of them masked. They shot the driver and the guard. They took the strongbox and then they took me." "Did they say anything? Give you any idea who they were?" "They called their leader Dutch. He was the one who hurt me." She touched her bruised face gingerly. "I heard them talking about ransom. They were going to send a letter to my uncle demanding money, but Dutch wanted to wait a few days to make my uncle suffer." "You said you escaped last night. How?" "They were drunk, celebrating some other robbery they had pulled off. I was tied up in a tent, but the knots were loose. I worked at them for hours until I got free. Then I ran. I just ran and ran until I could not run anymore. I found your porch and crawled under it. I thought if I could just hide until morning, maybe I would figure out what to do next. Yates nodded. You did well. You stayed alive. That is what matters. What happens now? Now I ride to town and tell your uncle you are safe. Then we figure out how to deal with these men. No, Katherine said, fear sharp in her voice. You cannot go after them. They will kill you. I am not planning on going after them, Yates said. But your uncle needs to know you are alive, and the sheriff needs to be told about the gang. The sheriff is useless, Katherine said bitterly. Uncle Robert told me in his letters. He is more interested in drinking than in doing his job. Yates frowned. He had heard similar complaints about Sheriff Daniels, a man who had bought his position rather than earned it. Then we will have to be smart about this, he said. He rode to Sweetwater that afternoon, leaving Katherine with strict instructions to stay inside and keep the door barred. The town was bustling when he arrived, a collection of wooden buildings lining a single main street. The bank was the largest structure, a two-story affair with Lawson Bank painted in gold letters across the front. Robert Lawson was a tall man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a suit that must have cost more than Yates made in a year. When Yates told him about Katherine, the banker's face went white, then red with fury. Those animals, he hissed. Where is she? Is she hurt? She is at my ranch. She has been beaten, but she will recover. She is strong. Lawson sank into his chair, his hands shaking. I received a ransom note yesterday. They wanted $10,000. I was preparing to pay it. Do not, Yates said. If you pay them, they will just come back for more. Or they will target someone else. Then what do? I cannot lose Katherine. She is all the family I have left. We keep her safe and we find these men, but we do it quietly, no law involved yet. These gangs have eyes and ears everywhere. Lawson looked at him sharply. Who are you, Mr. Anderson? Just a rancher who wants to do the right thing. You are more than that. I can see it in your eyes. Lawson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. I will pay you to protect her, whatever you want. I do not want your money, Yates said. I want these men stopped. Then we want the same thing. Lawson turned back to him. Keep Katherine safe. I will make inquiries, see what I can learn about this gang. And Mr. Anderson, thank you. Yates rode back to his ranch as the sun was setting. When he arrived, Katherine was standing at the window watching for him. The relief on her face when she saw him made something tighten in his chest. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Katherine's strength returned slowly, and with it, her spirit. She was not content to lie in bed, so Yates found her small tasks to do. She mended his shirts, cooked meals, and tended to the garden he had been neglecting. She moved carefully, favoring her injured ribs, but she moved. They talked in the evenings after the work was done. Katherine told him about growing up in Chicago, about her parents and their sudden deaths from influenza. She spoke of her loneliness in a big city where she had no one, and her hope that Montana would be a fresh start. Yates found himself telling her things he had not spoken of in years. His childhood on a farm in Kansas, his decision to join the cavalry, the battles he had fought against hostile tribes and outlaws. You regret it? Katherine asked one night. Joining the army? Yates considered the question. No, it made me who I am, but I am glad those days are behind me. Do you ever get lonely out here? Sometimes, he admitted. But lonely is better than being surrounded by people you cannot trust. Is that why you never married? He smiled at her directness. I suppose. I never met anyone who made me think differently. Katherine looked at him, something soft in her eyes. That is sad. Maybe, or maybe I was just waiting for the right reason to change my mind. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Katherine looked away first, her cheeks flushing. A week after Yates had found her, Robert Lawson rode out to the ranch with news. The gang that had taken Katherine was led by a man named Dutch Keller, a notorious outlaw with a price on his head in 3 territories. He and his men were believed to be hiding in the hills north of Sweetwater, but they moved frequently, making them difficult to track. "I have contacted the territorial marshal," Lawson said. "He is sending men, but it will take time. Weeks, maybe. Katherine cannot hide here forever," Yates said. "Eventually they will figure out where she is. Then what do you suggest? We draw them out. Use the ransom as bait." "Absolutely not," Katherine said, stepping into the room. She had been listening from the doorway. "I will not be used as bait." "You would not be in any real danger," Yates said. "We would control the situation." "Like I controlled the situation when they took me from the stage." Katherine's voice was sharp with anger. "I will not do it." "Katherine, please," Lawson said. "It may be the only way." "No. I am done being a victim." She looked at Yates, her green eyes blazing. "If we are going to do this, then I want to be part of the plan, not just some helpless woman waiting to be rescued again." Yates saw the determination in her face and realized that arguing would be pointless. "All right," he said. "We will figure it out together." They spent the next few days planning. Katherine suggested using her uncle's bank as the exchange point, but Yates argued it was too public, too many chances for things to go wrong. Instead, they decided on a remote location, an old mining camp 10 miles outside of town. Lawson would deliver the ransom money, Yates would be hidden nearby with a rifle, and Katherine would stay safely at the ranch. Except Katherine had no intention of staying at the ranch. The night before the exchange, she approached Yates as he was cleaning his rifle. "I am coming with you tomorrow," she said. "No, you are not." "Yes, I am, and you cannot stop me. Katherine, this is dangerous. These men are killers." "I know what they are. I was their prisoner. And that is exactly why I need to be there. I need to see them caught. I need to see that they cannot hurt anyone else." Yates set down his rifle and looked at her. In the lamplight she was beautiful, her bruises faded now to yellow and green, her eyes fierce and alive. Something had been growing between them over these past weeks, something neither of them had spoken aloud. It was in the way she smiled at him over breakfast, the way his hand lingered when he helped her carry water from the well. It was in the long talks in the evenings and the comfortable silences during the day. "I cannot lose you," Yates said quietly. Katherine's expression softened. "You will not. But I need to do this. Please, Yates, trust me." He wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the house if necessary. But he saw in her eyes that she needed this, needed to reclaim some sense of control over her own life. And he realized that he respected her too much to deny her that. "All right," he said, "but you stay back and you do exactly what I say." She nodded, relief flooding her face. Then, impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you." The exchange was set for noon the next day. Yates and Katherine rode out early, positioning themselves in the rocks above the old mining camp. Lawson arrived at the appointed time, carrying a satchel full of money. They waited, the sun beating down on them, the silence broken only by the wind. Then they came. 4 riders, just as Katherine had described. They approached cautiously, guns drawn. The one in front, a big man with a scarred face, had to be Dutch Keller. The exchange was brief. Lawson handed over the money and Dutch opened the satchel to verify the contents. Then he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Where is the girl?" Dutch called out. "The note said we get the money when we return the girl." "You do not have her," Lawson said, his voice steady despite the fear Yates could see in his posture. "She escaped. The money is for your silence. Leave this territory and never come back." Dutch's face darkened. "You think you can cheat me? I know she is alive. I know someone is hiding her. And when I find her, I am going to make her pay for running." "That is not going to happen," Yates said, standing up from his hiding place, his rifle trained on Dutch. The outlaws spun, their guns coming up, but Yates was faster. He fired, the shot hitting the gun out of Dutch's hand. The other 3 men scattered, diving for cover. Lawson ran for his horse as bullets started flying. It was chaos, loud and violent. Yates fired again and again, keeping the outlaws pinned down. He saw one of them break for the horses and shot him in the leg. The man went down screaming. Then Katherine was beside him, a pistol in her hand. Yates did not know where she had gotten it, but she aimed carefully and fired, hitting one of the outlaws in the shoulder. The man dropped his gun and fell. "I told you to stay back," Yates shouted over the gunfire. "And I did not listen," Katherine shouted back. Dutch and one other man managed to reach their horses and ride off, but the 2 wounded outlaws were captured. It was not the clean victory Yates had hoped for, but it was something. The territorial marshal's men arrived an hour later, having been positioned nearby in case things went wrong. They took the wounded outlaws into custody and rode off in pursuit of Dutch and his remaining man. Yates and Katherine rode back to the ranch in silence, the adrenaline slowly fading. When they arrived, Yates finally let his anger show. "You could have been killed," he said, his voice tight. "You promised to stay back." "I promised no such thing," Katherine said, "and I can handle myself." "This is not a game, Katherine. Those men were trying to kill us." "I know that." "I was there, and I helped. You are welcome, by the way." Yates stared at her, frustration warring with admiration. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. And you are the most overprotective man I have ever met. We are even." They glared at each other for a long moment, and then, suddenly, Yates was kissing her. He did not plan it, did not think about it. One second they were arguing, and the next his hands were in her hair and her lips were on his, and nothing else mattered. Katherine kissed him back fiercely, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Yates said. "Then you are slow," Katherine said, smiling. "I have wanted it since the first day I woke up and saw you." They kissed again, slower this time, sweeter. When they finally went inside, Yates pulled her close and held her, feeling her heart beating against his chest. "Stay," he said. "Do not go back to town. Stay here with me." "I have nowhere else I would rather be," Katherine said. The territorial marshal's men tracked down Dutch Keller and his last man 3 days later. There was a shootout, and both outlaws were killed. The news came to Yates's ranch via Robert Lawson, who rode out with a smile on his face. "It is over," Lawson said. "Katherine, you are safe now." Katherine looked at Yates, then back at her uncle. "I was always safe," she said. Yates made sure of that. Lawson studied the 2 of them, seeing the way they stood close together, the way Yates's hand rested protectively on Katherine's back. "I see," he said, a knowing smile on his face. "Well then, I suppose I should be asking Mr. Anderson his intentions." "My intentions are to marry your niece, if she will have me," Yates said, looking at Katherine. "I know I do not have much to offer, just this ranch and whatever life we can build together. But I love her, and I will spend every day making sure she is happy." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Lawson laughed, a joyous sound. "Then I suppose I should welcome you to the family, Mr. Anderson. Though I suspect Katherine would have married you regardless of my blessing." "You are right about that," Katherine said. They were married 3 weeks later in Sweetwater's small church, with half the town in attendance. Katherine wore a dress her uncle had ordered from Chicago, white lace and silk that made her look like something out of a dream. Yates wore his best suit, feeling awkward and self-conscious until he saw Katherine walking down the aisle toward him. Then everything else faded away. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Katherine like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. The congregation cheered and someone started playing a fiddle, and the celebration spilled out into the street. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the bed where Yates had first tended to Katherine's wounds. It felt right, coming full circle like this. Katherine was nervous, Yates could tell, but he was gentle with her, taking his time, showing her with his hands and his mouth and his body how much he loved her. When they finally came together, it was perfect, a joining of not just their bodies but their souls. Afterward they lay tangled in the sheets, Katherine's head on Yates's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I never thought I would have this," Katherine said softly. "After my parents died, I felt so alone. I thought I would always feel that way." "You are not alone anymore," Yates said. "You have me. You will always have me. Promise." "I promise." The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch demanded constant work and money was tight. Katherine learned to cook and clean and tend to the animals, tasks she had never done in her privileged Chicago life. Yates taught her to ride properly, to shoot, to read the weather and the land. She was a quick learner, and she never complained, even when the work left her exhausted. In return, Katherine brought something to the ranch that had been missing before: life. She planted flowers around the house, bright splashes of color against the brown earth. She sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her. She turned the spare room into a study, filling it with books her uncle sent from town. And every night, she and Yates sat together on the porch and watched the sun set, talking about their day, making plans for the future. Robert Lawson was a frequent visitor, bringing supplies and news from town. He doted on Katherine, clearly relieved to see her happy and healthy. He also became a good friend to Yates, the two men bonding over chess games and discussions about politics and the future of Montana. 2 years into their marriage, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates one morning over breakfast, her hands shaking as she held his. "We are going to have a baby," she said. Yates felt a surge of joy so intense it nearly knocked him over. He pulled Katherine into his arms, holding her tight, feeling her laughter against his chest. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. The pregnancy was difficult. Katherine suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, unable to keep anything down. Yates hovered over her constantly, worried, until she finally snapped at him to give her some space. He tried, but it was hard. He had never felt so helpless, watching her suffer and being unable to do anything about it. But as the months passed, Katherine's strength returned. Her belly grew round and full, and Yates would lie beside her at night with his hand on her stomach, feeling the baby kick. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about how their lives were about to change in ways they could not even imagine. Katherine went into labor on a cold February night in 1887. Yates rode to town to fetch the doctor and a midwife, then paced the floor for hours while Katherine labored in their bedroom. Her screams tore at him, made him want to break down the door and take her pain away. But all he could do was wait. Finally, just before dawn, he heard a new sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son," she said. Yates went into the room, his heart in his throat. Katherine was lying in the bed, sweaty and exhausted, but her face was radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and squalling. "Yates," she said, her voice hoarse, "meet your son." Yates took the baby carefully, afraid he might break him. The infant was so small, so fragile, with a shock of dark hair and Katherine's green eyes. He looked up at his parents, and Yates felt something shift inside him, a fundamental change in who he was. He was a father now. This tiny person was depending on him for everything. What should we name him? Katherine asked. They had discussed names endlessly, unable to agree. But looking at his son now, Yates knew. James, he said. After your father. Katherine's eyes filled with tears. James Anderson, she said. It is perfect. James was a colicky baby, crying through the night and sleeping fitfully during the day. Yates and Katherine took turns walking him, soothing him, trying everything they could think of to ease his discomfort. It was exhausting, but it was also wonderful. Watching Katherine with their son, seeing the fierce love in her eyes, Yates fell in love with her all over again. Robert Lawson was a devoted grandfather, visiting as often as his business allowed. He brought gifts for James: a hand-carved cradle, tiny clothes, a savings account in the baby's name. He would hold his grandson for hours, talking to him about the future, about the world he would grow up in. He is going to do great things, Lawson said one day. I can feel it. He just needs to sleep through the night, Katherine said, laughing. That would be great enough for me. As James grew, so did the ranch. Yates bought more cattle, expanded the pastures, hired help during the busy seasons. Money was still tight, but they were making it work. Katherine kept the books, proving to have a head for numbers that rivaled her uncle's. Together, they built something real, something that would last. When James was 2, Katherine became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier. She had energy, glowing health that made Yates breathe easier. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1889, a tiny thing with blonde hair and Yates's serious gray eyes. They named her Alice, after Yates's mother. With 2 children, the house felt full in the best possible way. James was a curious, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the horses and the cattle and the land. Alice was quieter, more contemplative, content to sit with her mother and play with rag dolls or watch the clouds. The years passed in a blur of work and laughter and love. There were hard times, of course. Droughts that killed the grass and made the cattle suffer. Winters so cold that Yates had to break ice on the water troughs twice a day. Illnesses that swept through the family, leaving everyone weak and scared. But there were good times, too. Harvest festivals in town where James won the sack race 3 years running. Christmas mornings when the children woke to find simple gifts and stockings filled with candy. Summer evenings when the whole family would ride out to the creek and swim in the cool water. Katherine and Yates grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They knew each other's rhythms, could communicate with just a glance. They still fought sometimes, about money or the children or the ranch, but they always made up, remembering what they had been through to find each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Katherine with a trip to town. They left the children with their uncle and checked into the hotel, a rare luxury. They had dinner at the best restaurant Sweetwater had to offer, then danced to a small band playing in the saloon. You ever regret it? Yates asked as they swayed together. Marrying me. Giving up the life you could have had, Katherine looked up at him, her green eyes clear and certain. Not for a single second. You gave me everything I ever wanted. A home. A family. A purpose. I love you, Yates Anderson. I will love you until the day I die. And beyond that, I hope, Yates said, kissing her. And beyond that, Katherine agreed. When James was 16, he announced that he wanted to join the cavalry like his father. Yates felt his stomach drop. He knew the dangers, had lived through them. The idea of his son facing those same dangers made him want to lock the boy in his room until he came to his senses. But Katherine, wise as always, counseled patience. He needs to make his own choices, she said. Just like we did. We can guide him, but we cannot control him. So Yates sat down with James and told him stories, the real stories, not the sanitized versions he had shared before. He talked about the blood and the fear and the friends he had lost. He talked about the nightmares that still woke him sometimes, the memories that never fully faded. James listened to it all, and when Yates was done, he said, "I still want to go, Pa. I need to see the world beyond this ranch. I need to know who I am when I am not just your son." Yates understood that, understood it better than he wanted to admit. So he gave James his blessing, and when the boy left for basic training, Yates held Katherine while she cried. Alice, meanwhile, had developed a passion for medicine. She spent hours reading every medical text she could get her hands on, practicing bandaging on her dolls, and, when they would let her, on the ranch hands. When she was 17, she announced that she wanted to go to nursing school in Helena. Yates and Katherine looked at each other across the dinner table, seeing their children growing up and away, chasing their own dreams. It was hard, but it was also right. They had raised their children to be independent, to think for themselves. Now they had to let them go. With the children gone, the house felt empty. Yates and Katherine rattled around in it, finding themselves with time they had not had in years. They used it to reconnect, to remember who they had been before they were parents. They took long rides together, exploring parts of the ranch they had neglected. They rode together in the evenings, Katherine's head on Yates's shoulder as they shared a book, and they talked. About their children, about their hopes and fears for the future. About the ranch, and whether they should expand or downsize. About growing old together and what that meant. Robert Lawson passed away in 1895, leaving his considerable fortune to Katherine and the grandchildren he had doted on. Katherine grieved deeply for the uncle who had been like a father to her, who had given her a home when she had nowhere else to go. Yates held her through the long nights when the sadness overwhelmed her, reminding her of the good times, the love they had shared. With the inheritance, Yates and Katherine were able to hire more permanent help for the ranch, easing the burden on Yates's aging body. They also established a scholarship fund in Robert's name, helping young people in Sweetwater get an education they otherwise could not afford. James returned from the cavalry after 4 years, older and more serious but mercifully whole. He brought with him a wife, a sweet girl named Mary from Wyoming, and announced his intention to settle down and help run the ranch. Yates welcomed him back with open arms, grateful to have his son home safe. Alice finished nursing school and took a position at the hospital in Helena. She wrote long letters home, full of stories about her patients and the satisfaction she found in helping people heal. She visited when she could, bringing with her a vitality and joy that filled the house. In 1899, Alice came home with a man. His name was Thomas, a doctor she worked with, and the way they looked at each other reminded Yates so much of how he and Katherine had been in the early days that it made his heart ache. Thomas asked for Alice's hand, and Yates gave it, though it was hard to let his little girl go. The wedding was held at the ranch, a beautiful summer day with the whole family gathered together. Yates walked Alice down the aisle, his heart full to bursting. When he placed her hand in Thomas's, he whispered, "Take care of her." "I will," Thomas promised. "I swear it." James and Mary had children, 3 of them in quick succession, and suddenly the house was full of grandchildren. Yates found that being a grandfather was different from being a father, sweeter somehow, less fraught with worry. He could spoil the children and then send them back to their parents, enjoying the best parts of childhood without the constant responsibility. Katherine was a wonderful grandmother, patient and kind, always ready with a story or a cookie or a hug. She taught the children to read and to cook, and to appreciate the beauty of the Montana landscape. She passed on the stories of her own childhood, of the family they came from, making sure the children knew their history. In the spring of 1903, Yates woke to find Katherine lying very still beside him. For a moment, panic seized him. Then she stirred, opening her eyes and smiling at him. "I had the most wonderful dream," she said. "I was young again and I was running and you were chasing me. We were laughing and the sun was warm and everything was perfect." "It sounds nice," Yates said, pulling her close. "It was, but this is better. This is real." They were in their early 50s now, gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but to Yates, Katherine was as beautiful as the day he had found her under his porch. More beautiful, even, because now he knew her completely, knew every facet of her mind and heart and soul. That summer, they took a trip together, just the two of them, riding out to the old mining camp where they had faced down Dutch Keller and his gang all those years ago. The camp was ruins now, nature reclaiming what man had abandoned. They stood there together, remembering. "I was so scared that day," Katherine said. "Not of Dutch and his men, but of losing you, of losing this chance at happiness before it even really began." "We have had a good life," Yates said, "better than I ever dreamed possible. Do you think it will last, this happiness?" "As long as we are together, yes. I believe it will." They stayed at the camp until sunset, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. Then they rode home, back to the ranch, back to the life they had built together. The years continued to pass, marked by births and deaths, by seasons and celebrations. James took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, his steady hand ensuring its continued prosperity. Alice and Thomas had children of their own, expanding the family further. Yates and Katherine settled into a comfortable rhythm, the pace of their days slower now but no less satisfying. They still took their evening walks, still sat on the porch and watched the sunsets. They still held hands, still kissed each other good morning and good night. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1914, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house and yard were full of laughter and music and love. Yates stood on the porch, surveying it all, and felt Katherine slip her hand into his. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For finding me. For giving me a bed and a future. For loving me." Yates turned to her, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "I should be thanking you. You gave me a reason to live, to build something that mattered. You gave me everything." They kissed, and their children and grandchildren cheered, and Yates thought that if his life ended right then, it would be enough. He had lived, truly lived, and he had loved and been loved in return. What more could any man ask for? But life did not end there. It continued, rolling forward like the seasons. Yates and Katherine grew older, their bodies slowing, their memories sometimes failing, but their love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger, refined by time into something pure and unbreakable. In the winter of 1920, Katherine fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing serious, but it settled into her lungs and would not leave. The doctor came, did what he could, but Yates could see the worry in his eyes. For 3 months, Yates nursed Katherine, just as he had nursed her that first day when he found her under his porch. He brought her soup and water, read to her for hours, held her hand through the long nights when the coughing kept her awake. Alice came to help, bringing her medical knowledge and her gentle touch. She did everything she could, but some things were beyond even her skill. One morning in early March, Katherine woke and looked at Yates with clear, lucid eyes. "I am going to die soon," she said. It was not a question. "Do not say that," Yates said, though he knew she was right. "You are going to get better." "Yates," she squeezed his hand. "We both know that is not true, and it is all right. I have had a good life, a wonderful life. I have no regrets." "I do," Yates said, tears streaming down his face. "I regret that I cannot give you more time. You gave me everything that mattered. You saved me, Yates, not just that first day, but every day after. You showed me what love was, what family was. You gave me a home and children and a lifetime of happiness. That is more than most people ever get." "It is not enough. It will never be enough." Katherine smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart decades ago. "Then we will just have to find each other in the next life and do it all over again." She died 2 days later, peacefully in her sleep. Yates was holding her hand when it happened, and he felt the exact moment she left, felt the absence of her like a physical wound. The funeral was enormous, half the state showing up to pay their respects. Katherine had touched so many lives through her kindness and her generosity and her steadfast love. People spoke of her warmth, her intelligence, her strength. Yates listened to it all numb, unable to fully process that she was gone. After the funeral, James tried to convince Yates to move into town to live with him and marry where he would not be alone. But Yates refused. This ranch, this house, was where Katherine's spirit lived. He could feel her here in every room, every corner. To leave would be to abandon her, and he could not do that, so he stayed and he grieved. The first year without her was the hardest. Everything reminded him of Katherine. The flowers she had planted, now overgrown. The books she had loved, gathering dust. The side of the bed where she had slept, cold and empty. But slowly, gradually, the grief softened. It did not go away, would never go away, but it became bearable. Yates found comfort in his children and grandchildren, in the legacy he and Katherine had built together. He found comfort in the land, in the work that still needed to be done. He lived for another 8 years after Katherine died, years filled with quiet purpose. He watched his grandchildren grow and have children of their own. He saw the ranch continue to thrive under James's management. He maintained Katherine's garden, making sure her flowers bloomed every spring. In the summer of 1928, on a warm August morning, Yates woke feeling lighter than he had in years. He got up, made himself coffee, and went out to sit on the porch. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. As he sat there, sipping his coffee, Yates thought he saw a figure in the distance. A woman walking toward the house. She was too far away to see clearly, but something about the way she moved was familiar. His heart started to pound. He stood, shading his eyes against the sun, trying to see better. The woman came closer, and now Yates could make out her features. Dark hair, green eyes, a smile that could light up the world. "Katherine," he whispered. She did not answer, just kept walking, her hand outstretched. Yates went to meet her, his old legs carrying him faster than they had in years. When he reached her, she took his hand, and suddenly he was young again, strong and whole. They stood together in the morning light, and Katherine said, "I told you we would find each other again." James found his father later that morning, sitting peacefully in his chair on the porch, a smile on his face. He had passed quietly without pain, the coffee cup still warm in his hand. They buried Yates next to Katherine, under a big oak tree overlooking the valley. The whole family gathered, just as they had for Katherine, and they told stories of the man who had built this ranch, who had saved a woman under his porch and given her a bed and a future, who had loved so deeply and so well. As they lowered him into the ground, a breeze picked up, rustling through the grass, and for a moment, everyone swore they could hear laughter. 2 voices intertwined, joyful and free. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, a testament to the love that had built it. And on warm summer evenings, when the light was just right, people would sometimes see 2 figures walking together in the fields, hand in hand, their love eternal and unending, a story that would live on forever in the Montana wind.